Have you ever heard the sound of someone crying in the night, but no one's there? Appalachian folklore talks of a woman in white roaming the woods, calling for someone who was lost long ago. But it's not just myth. Some say they've seen her. Others didn't live to tell the tale. Stay with us for the terrifying truth behind these eerie sightings. Number 1, the crying woman of Devil's Hollow. Imagine this. You're deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town when you hear it. A soft, mournful wail somewhere in the trees. It's faint at first, a sound so delicate it almost blends with the rustle of leaves. Yet as you stop in your tracks to listen, it grows louder, more defined. There's no mistaking it now. It's a woman crying. You call out, your voice cracking against the silence, but there's no answer, just that eerie, heart-wrenching sobbing. And then the sound shifts. It's coming closer. Devil's Hollow is known as one of the most desolate stretches of the Appalachian wilderness. Nestled between towering ridges and dense forests, this forgotten pocket of land has long had a sinister reputation among locals. They'll warn you, if you ask, to steer clear of the area after sundown. They speak in hushed tones about the crying woman, a restless spirit who haunts these woods after losing her child in a tragic fire generations ago. Some say she's looking for him even now, wandering endlessly through the shadowy trees. Others claim she isn't searching for her child at all. She's luring others to share in her grief. This is where an experienced hiker found himself one late afternoon, walking an unmarked trail. According to his account, passed down through whispers in town, the day had started uneventfully. He'd been following a ridge that overlooked Devil's Hollow when he realized he might lose daylight soon. That's when the faint crying started, just barely audible over the soft hum of the forest. At first he thought he was imagining it, but as he paused to listen, it became clear. The sound wasn't his mind playing tricks. It was very real. Despite every instinct to turn back, he called out, hoping someone might be nearby. His voice rippled outward and died in the empty woods. But the crying didn't stop. Instead, it seemed to shift locations, coming from further ahead. Concerned that someone might genuinely be in distress, the hiker pressed forward. Just a little farther, he thought. Every step brought him deeper into the forest, farther from the faint line of the trail. The crying only grew louder. For a moment he thought he saw something, a pale figure darting between the trees. He stopped, scanning the forest. There was nothing there. The sunlight sank lower, slanting sharply between the trunks, and soon the shadows grew long. Still the crying continued. By now, though, it wasn't the fragile sound of a grieving woman. It had warped into something else entirely, an animalistic shriek that echoed impossibly in every direction. His breath caught, realization hitting him too late. He was completely lost. He turned in circles, trying to find his way back to the trail. Yet the longer he hesitated, the closer the sound seemed to draw, and then suddenly it stopped. Not long after, as he picked his way through brush, his flashlight faltered, its weak beam flickering over the looming darkness. And then, in that narrow cone of light, he saw it, a flash of white, shifting just beyond the trees. It wasn't running, not exactly. It moved quickly but quietly, too fluid to be human. He froze. He'd barely had a chance to process the sight when another sound broke through the still air, a low, gut-wrenching moan, so close that it felt like it came from behind him. Whipping his light around, he found nothing except more trees. The hiker stumbled across a clearing just as night fully fell, his heart pounding as his light caught the silhouette of a crumbling cabin. He hesitated at first. Every nerve in his body screamed for him to run, but he couldn't ignore the faint hope, the slim chance, that the crying had come from here. Steeling himself, he pushed open the sagging door. Inside, shadows clung to every corner, and the air smelled of decay. His flashlight swept across the room, stopping on the fireplace, where something small and discolored rested in the ashes. It was a child's shoe. Nearby, claw marks gouged deep into the walls, raking from floor to ceiling. Before he could process what he was seeing, the crying returned, deafeningly loud, echoing from outside the cabin. That's when he ran. Racing blindly through the woods, branches clawing at his skin, he felt pursued the entire way, never seeing anything but somehow knowing he wasn't alone. Eventually, he found the edge of the forest and collapsed onto the road. When he recounted the story later, he described how, just before the trees finally thinned, he had turned back one last time. Standing quietly in the shadows was a figure cloaked in white, her face obscured. His flashlight flickered one last time and then died. When he finally made it to safety, he learned what most locals already knew. Decades earlier, the cabin he'd stumbled upon had burned to the ground with a mother and her young child still inside. Some say she cries for him, refusing to leave until she finds him. Others believe she has no interest in being reunited. She simply waits to pull others into the same doom she met that night. But here's something to consider. Maybe not everything in these woods is ethereal. Some stories hint at stranger, more corporeal things stalking people in the Appalachians, like the creatures that wear the skin of the familiar yet move in ways that defy the natural order. Let's talk about that next. Number 2, the knot deer of Black Ridge. It's late at night, and the road through Black Ridge twists and winds like a living thing. Your headlights, the only source of light for miles, catch something ahead. A flicker of movement at the edge of the trees, small and skittish at first glance, like a deer. You slow down, watching as it emerges, its shape fully illuminated now. But something doesn't sit right. The legs are bent at the wrong angles. Its eyes reflect light directly back at you, almost like a predator, and they aren't on the sides of its head. They're forward-facing, too human. And as it moves, there's a strange rhythm to its steps, one that immediately sends a jolt of instinctual unease down your spine. It's not a deer, not at all. Deep in Appalachian lore, there's a regional legend whispered about late at night when fires burn low and nerves start to fray. The knot deer. Locals say it closely resembles a deer, unless you're looking too closely. Then the differences become clear. Slightly too large or too small, limbs moving at unnatural angles, its neck bent in a way that no animal could survive. And if you get close enough, its eyes aren't empty the way most prey animals' eyes are. They're alive and wrong, filled with something ancient. Some even describe the creature watching them, not like prey, but like prey itself, turned predator. Even more unsettling is the way it moves. The motions are jerky, erratic, almost as if it's mimicking what it thinks a deer should look like. The Cash family, who'd been planning a weekend of camping on Black Ridge, never expected to become part of this unnatural tale. The night started peacefully enough, a tent pitched under the stars, marshmallows browning over the fire, the crickets humming in the distance. The dense woods surrounding their site were nothing but a beautiful backdrop. As the fire burned low, the youngest daughter spotted what she thought was a deer just inside the tree line. She called for her parents to look. Sitting by the fire, her father waved it off at first. A deer was nothing to worry about, until his wife, staring intently, corrected her. "That's no deer." The entire family's attention turned toward the tree line. The thing stood still as stone, staring straight at them. It didn't lower its head to graze. It didn't flinch or startle when they made noise. The longer the father looked, the more his stomach churned. Something about it wasn't adding up. Its limbs seemed too long, its shoulders rising unnaturally high, and its neck bent backward, almost bird-like. Then it moved, not away but toward them, slowly, purposefully, like it was testing something. Instead of scattering as a deer might, the family froze. The father described later how its body jerked in odd, deliberate motions, as though it weren't comfortable in its own skin. And then the sound came. A low, clicking noise, deep and guttural, like rocks grinding together. No one could agree on exactly where the sound came from, if it came from its mouth or its body or nowhere at all, but it was enough to snap them out of their shock. The father yelled, waved his arms, throwing sticks toward the thing, assuming it would scare off, but the creature only stretched its neck toward them as if observing. Then, without warning, it stood upright on its hind legs. Imagine seeing something that should be four-legged suddenly towering over you, its elongated body swaying slightly in the breeze, its head jerking side to side like it was sniffing the air. The mother grabbed her daughter and backed toward the tent as fear swallowed the campsite whole. All the while, the guttural clicking continued, louder now, echoing. The thing took a deliberate step closer, its eyes locking on them, wide and unblinking. That's when the father grabbed the car keys, rushing his family into the vehicle. Fumbling with the lock, he swore he could feel it closing in behind them. Once inside, they tore down the mountain road, gravel spitting under their tires, the dense forest whipping past them in the headlights. But the creature wasn't finished. As the car barreled away, something emerged on the roadside, keeping perfect pace alongside them. It wasn't running in a natural way. Its body rippled and contorted with every step, but it stayed close, effortlessly. The family's eyes locked on its shadow, growing impossibly long beneath the moonlight, stretching farther than any shape that size should. The mother, sitting in the passenger seat, said later she couldn't look at its face directly. It didn't look like anything real. They didn't stop driving until they reached the first gas station miles away. Trembling, they told the clerk what they saw. The man, an older local, only shifted uneasily, telling them, "You're lucky you made it." Not many people who see that thing do. He wouldn't elaborate much, but he repeated the same ominous line commonly tied to sightings of the not deer. If it sees you, it knows you now, and it doesn't forget. Some say the not deer is just folklore born of the Appalachian isolation, an eerie way to explain the strange sights and sounds you might encounter when alone. Others tie it to skinwalker legends, or even something supernatural, a creature that mimics life but doesn't quite understand it. Whatever it is, one thing's for sure. When you see it, run and don't look back. But in these mountains, sometimes running isn't enough. Sometimes the darkest secrets of Appalachia involve no pursuit at all, just an unsettling silence where life once was. Let's talk about Silent Pines. Number 3. The vanished town of Silent Pines. What if an entire town could vanish overnight, leaving behind no explanation, just questions? That's the mystery of Silent Pines, a forgotten community buried deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Once a thriving coal mining town, it was abandoned sometime in the 1940s. But no one seems to know why. Official records simply stopped, as if the town ceased to exist. Some say the mines dried up, taking the economy with them. Others swear something far darker happened, something still hiding in the shadows of this lost place. Silent Pines is a whispered name among mountaineers, locals, and dedicated urban explorers. Sitting far off any main road, it takes hours of hiking into the thickest, most isolated parts of the forest to find it. Those brave enough to make the trek describe finding homes that stand eerily intact, weathered yet untouched by human activity for decades. Furniture still sits in place. There are plates on the tables. One man claimed he saw a child's doll left in a yard, its faded face staring blankly toward a swing set that looked as though it hadn't moved in years. Some buildings are half collapsed, while others seem frozen in time, giving the sense that whatever happened quickly. It's precisely that sense of mystery which drew 3 urban explorers to Silent Pines just a few years ago. They'd heard the stories about the ghost town and were eager to document it themselves. Their curiosity brought them face to face with something none of them could have anticipated. The trek took most of the day, following a series of increasingly faint trails, until they came upon the edge of the town as the sun dipped low on the horizon. At first it was quiet, except for a soft wind threading through the trees. Too quiet. The sound of wildlife, something they'd grown used to hearing throughout their hike, suddenly disappeared as soon as they reached the outskirts. The explorers spread out, entering the houses one by one. Inside, the eerie preservation of life was even more unsettling. One described opening a door to find a kitchen table with a full meal still arranged on it, now rotted and long decayed, with silverware at neat angles, almost as if the family had stepped away for a moment and never returned. Another house contained clothes tossed haphazardly across an upstairs room, as though the residents had been packing in a hurry but never finished. The town's church loomed at the far end of a dirt path, a steeple rising high above the ruins. They left it for last, sensing its presence was different somehow, darker. When they finally pushed open the heavy double doors of the church, the air inside was heavy, oppressive, like it had been sealed off from the world. Shining a light over the rows of pews, they saw something that stopped them cold. The wood was covered in deep claw marks. Unmistakable grooves raked across the backs and legs of most of the benches. The faint carvings of crosses and religious symbols etched into the walls seemed to hold no power against the signs of violence present in the room. None of the 3 spoke much as they explored further, but all of them reported the same thing later, an overwhelming sense of being watched. That feeling only grew stronger when they found what appeared to be an old, leather-bound journal buried beneath a pile of debris. Flipping through its cracked pages, they discovered that it had belonged to someone who'd lived there during the town's final days. As the journal went on, the mood darkened. Early entries described strange occurrences, neighbors falling ill, acting withdrawn, or reporting nightmares where something stalked them from the woods. The later passages became chaotic, scrawled in frantic handwriting, detailing strange whispers at night and shadowy figures watching from the tree line. The last line of the journal was brief. "The forest wants us gone." With the weight of what they'd discovered pressing on them, the group agreed to leave before darkness fell, but Silent Pines seemed unwilling to let them go. As they followed their original route out, Faint sounds began to drift through the trees. Whispers, footsteps crunching leaves just slightly behind them. And then, the distant ringing of a church bell, its hollow tone cutting through the unnatural silence. One of the explorers looked back and froze, swearing later that they saw figures slowly stepping out from the forest's edge. They were human-shaped but wrong, dressed in old-fashioned clothing that didn't belong in the present. Their faces, however, were obscured by shadow, as if the light refused to touch them. Panic set in as the group broke into a sprint, trying to retrace their path. But the faster they moved, the more the sensation of being followed increased. The figures never seemed close enough to see clearly, but the sense of pursuit was undeniable. By the time they broke free of the woods, there was only one explorer left. Shaking and out of breath, he told the story to anyone who would listen. His 2 friends, he claimed, had been taken. The man never went back, warning anyone who inquired about Silent Pines to stay away. The town, according to him, doesn't want to be disturbed. And maybe the truth is buried there, in its empty houses and silent streets. Or maybe the forest, as the journal hinted, had swallowed it whole. Still, Silent Pines isn't an isolated story. The Appalachian Mountains are filled with places like this, places that don't want to be found, places that seem to actively resist explanation. Number 4, the whispers between the trees. Imagine standing alone in the middle of the woods, surrounded by towering trees so dense they blot out the sky. The silence is heavy, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves, and then you hear it, a whisper, low and jagged, like wind slipping through the cracks of a door. But there's no breeze, no other sound. Your name floats through the air, soft, almost playful, and just when you convince yourself it's all in your head, you hear it again, coming from a different direction. This is what one logger described during his brief, harrowing time working in an untouched stretch of Appalachian forest. The area was isolated, miles from any town, surrounded by nothing but endless trees. It was the kind of place where you'd expect peace and quiet, except something about this forest felt off from the start. The logger said the trees seemed too close together, their boughs twisting unnaturally toward one another, as if they were leaning in to listen. Even during the day, shadows stretched farther than they should have, and the forest seemed darker than it had any right to be. At first, it was little things. Tools would go missing even when he was certain he'd left them in plain sight. Axes would vanish, only to reappear on the other side of the work site. Trees that had been marked for cutting seemed to shift slightly overnight, their markings either faded or gone completely. Then the calls started. He swore he heard someone saying his name, faint and distant just beyond view. The first time it happened, he laughed it off. Maybe one of his coworkers was playing a prank. But the second time, he realized something chilling. The voice didn't belong to anyone he knew. It sounded like his own. The logger's unease deepened as the days went on. Shadows began moving at the edge of his vision. He'd glance toward the tree line and see figures darting between the trunks, too fast and too vague to identify. He wrote them off as animals, telling himself it was just his imagination running wild. But one morning, while walking through the forest to scout new cuts, he spotted something carved into a tree, a symbol he didn't recognize. It was deep and deliberate, like it had been scratched into the bark with impossible precision. Over time, more symbols appeared, spread across different parts of the forest, none of which anyone in the crew could explain. One night, everything came to a head. The logger had stayed late to finish up some work near camp. As dusk settled in, the air grew heavy and still, almost suffocating. Then came the sound, his own voice, clear and familiar, calling to him from deep in the woods. "Over here," it said. It wasn't frantic or frightened. It was coaxing, inviting. He froze, every instinct screaming at him not to move. But curiosity got the better of him. Clutching his flashlight, he followed the sound into the forest. The farther he went, the quieter the world seemed to become, as if the trees were soaking up all other noise. He found himself in a small clearing where the trees around the edge were twisted into bizarre shapes. Their branches curled and bent toward the center, forming what looked like a face, eyes made of knotted wood, a crooked mouth formed by intersecting branches. The whispers grew louder, overlapping now, every word unintelligible. He stared at the formation, barely able to breathe, as an overwhelming sense of dread settled in his chest. It wasn't just the shapes or the whispers. It was the feeling that he'd been led there, that he was exactly where the forest wanted him to be. The logger stumbled back to camp, shaking. He told his supervisor what had happened, but received only sideways glances and murmured assurances that he must have been overtired. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling he was being watched. Later that week, while working near the edge of the site, a massive tree came crashing down without warning, barely missing him by inches. The fall didn't seem natural. The ground had been still, the air undisturbed. When he looked closer at the base of the trunk, he found another strange, unexplainable marking carved into the wood. That was the last straw. He quit the next day. It wasn't until he spoke with locals after leaving the job that he began to learn more about the forest's reputation. Some refused to talk about it altogether, while others offered vague warnings. "The land remembers," one older man told him. "There are places here that don't want you digging, cutting, or staying. You bother them and they'll bother back." Similar stories popped up, loggers hearing voices, hikers losing their way only to stumble out hours later, dazed and terrified, claiming the trees themselves had turned them around. Appalachian folklore is full of tales like this. Many believe these woods are home to ancient spirits tied to the land, beings that protect it fiercely, punishing those who trespass too deeply. The symbols, the voices, the shifting shadows, many locals say, are warnings, and if you don't heed those warnings, the consequences only get worse. To this day, the logger refuses to go back, swearing that the forest had been trying to get rid of him all along. And he isn't alone in his belief. Throughout the Appalachian Mountains, there are stretches of wilderness that people avoid, places where the land itself seems alive and aware. Maybe it's superstition, or maybe some places truly don't forgive, and they never forget. The Appalachian Mountains, towering, ancient, and untamed, hold secrets we may never fully understand. For centuries, their dark valleys and dense forests have been fertile ground for stories that chill the bone. It's not just the isolation, it's the sense that something older than us is watching, waiting, perhaps even protecting what's theirs. These stories cling to the mind, the way whispers cling to the night air, refusing to fade. So, what do you think hides out there in the vast, uncharted wilderness? Let us know in the comments, if you dare. But remember, in these mountains, the answers don't wait to be found. They find you.